Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to everybody joining us today. Welcome to the third in the series of webinars, the Transformation Catalyst webinar series from Gagen MacDonald and Innovisor. My name is Hilton Barber. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing and Thought Leadership at Gagen MacDonald, and I'm delighted to have you join us here today for a fantastic conversation on mergers and acquisitions and the critical art of connecting two companies. I'm joined today by my dear friends and colleagues, Jeppe Hansgaard, the CEO and founder of Innovisor in Denmark, and Hilary Goodman, the Managing Director of Gagen MacDonald here in the United States. Before we get into the content and Jeppe and Hilary's conversation, I would like to just share some housekeeping with you today. There is a Q&A box on your screen, and we look forward to you submitting your questions through the course of the presentation. We do have a Q&A section towards the tail end where we look to get to the questions you submit. There's also, you'll notice, a series of really impressive downloads that you can access during the presentation. That includes the slides from today, along with a couple of other artifacts that we believe you'll find very, very useful. We'd encourage you to download all of those, and those are available at the bottom right of your screen under the Download tab. We anticipate a conversation of about 45 minutes, and then leaving 15 minutes or so for Q&A. So please don't be shy. We look forward to having your questions answered in this session. And with that, I'll turn you over to Jeppe and Hilary and look forward to you guys having a fantastic webinar. Thank you very much.
Hello, Hilton. Hello, everyone. This is Jeppe Hansgaard, CEO of Innovisor, and I'm calling in from Denmark right now.
And hi, it's a pleasure to be with you, Hilary Goodman, as Hilton mentioned, Managing Director with Gagen MacDonald.
Wonderful. Yeah, so what we're going to cover today is, as you can see in the agenda here to the left, it says, don't leave M&A integration to chance, change and sustain human behavior, and find and activate organization network. But I want to be a bit bold here. This is actually about rewriting the playbooks of how you're doing do M&A integration. It's about listening to people and working with people in ways that we at least do not see when we observe M&As from the outside. Yeah. And one of the ways we do this is actually by employing something called organization network analysis. And if you have been in some of these other sessions that we have had during this transformation webinars, you will know that this is a method we've been using for a lot of things. But let me just give you a few examples here. If you see this picture here, you see to the left, you see a formed organizational chart. That tells you something about who takes decisions, who works with whom, and so forth. In this case, we have colored teams, and we have shown leaders as squares and employees as circles. The picture to the right is then the O&A. This is an illustration. It's not a real example. But as you probably can see, it shows you a different view of the organization. It shows you who connects to whom. It can't actually tell you about who connects to whom, about what, when, and why. And in some cases, you also see other extremely great insights. For example, if I ask you to look at the leadership team, the squares, it immediately becomes evident that this leadership team is not really connected to each other. But I could also ask other questions, like if we were in a merger situation, who should we retain? Who would we want to engage in a change program if we wanted to succeed with a change? And I guess nobody would ask for a person sitting in the periphery here, right? We want to get to some people in the center. Or maybe a third question here, if we want to bridge these two companies, merge them together, who is it that we should connect? And again, there are certain people that we would rather connect than others because they're central. They're central to the communication flows, the collaboration flows, or the information flows. So this is what it's all about when we're talking about network analysis. I also want to say this is the last example you see that is made up. It's an illustration. The rest of the examples you'll see in this slide deck are real mergers and acquisition examples. So with that being said, I'll just go on to the next slide, because this is the third session in the webinar. Oh, sorry, it went dark here. The first session where our colleagues, Greg and Richard, they covered how you could use this for change and collaboration. And the second session with Sanna and Rob looked at belonging and leadership alignment and so forth. And now this is the third session, the post-merger integration session. And we really hope you've enjoyed them. We've had a total of 500 participants in these 3 sessions. And they have come from all continents. I know we have had a majority from North America, maybe due to the timing of it, but it's been a pleasure really to have people coming from all over the world to participate in these transformation webinars. Now this is the final session, and I want to say, even though we talk about post-merger integration, this is a session that is equally important to people working with carve-outs, if you're one of those few in the audience working with that, or maybe even for an internal merger. So I hope you will be inspired here as we go forward. Hilary, over to you.
Thank you for that, Jeppe. So what we want to do now is do a little brief poll here, if you wouldn't mind. And you can go ahead and answer using the options below. Have you personally experienced a post-merger integration? And just, answer candidly. There's no right or wrong answer. We just like to get a sense from an audience perspective, what's been your experience to date? So if you'll take just 20 seconds or so here and let us know your experience. Okay. All right. So it looks like the majority said C, yes, and it was partially successful. And that next is yes, and it was considered very successful. So good news is that it sounds like we've got a lot of folks on the phone who have some level of experience having gone through a post-merger integration. And when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll be eager to learn more from you as to particularly those where it was very successful, but of course those where it was partially successful, learn from you as to what made it such. So we'll cover that in just a bit here. We'll keep going, Jeppe?
Yes.
Okay. Oh.
This one. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So now I just want to provide a little bit of a backdrop here, if you will, for what's going on in the M&A market today and why are we seeing what it is we're seeing in terms of deal activity? Because I think these are some global stats that we've gathered, and one of the things that we've seen is that 2021 brought record-breaking M&A deal values. There was a bit of a down year in 2020, and that makes a lot of sense given the pandemic. But it really did rebound in 2021 to an all-time high with soaring valuations. And as you can see here on this slide, the total transaction values for 2021 were $5.9 trillion. Some buyers, just from looking at the research, some buyers seem to be motivated by the available assets and the low cost of capital. Others jumped in to stay competitive as their peers did deals. And what you could see in the research is that companies raced to acquire both capabilities that were going to transform them, as well as to scale up in others. And, interestingly enough, the market included a diverse map of deal makers and deal types. So 20 years ago, the deal scene was primarily made up of corporate buyers and some, financial investor activity. But today's M&A landscape is much different. So you don't just get corporate buyers, but you also get greater value from add-on deals, financial investors, special purpose acquisition companies, venture capitalists, corporate venture capital, et cetera. And so the headline here is just so to say that partly I think why it is that so many of you joining this webinar are seeing the kind of activity that you're seeing, with more than half of you having gone through some sort of M&A, is because of what we're seeing in the marketplace. So this is it's alive and it's well. And early indication is that 2022 is going to continue to be an active in the M&A space. And what's interesting is that there are specific sectors that show real growth. Said another way, certain sectors are booming more than others. So tech assets in particular, they seem to have decoupled from the broader M&A market. Healthcare similarly has seen assets soar in both tech and also healthcare. And it seems as though buyers are willing to pay a premium for high margin, high growth assets. Meanwhile, non-tech as well as non-healthcare assets were also up versus prior years. So you can really see that, there is a lot of activity, and it's not just consolidated within one particular sector. And then, maybe not interestingly enough, what we're seeing is that M&A is increasingly being used to be a means to find the right talent. The workforce is becoming a priority for deal making, where it certainly wasn't even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And whether companies are buying, borrowing, or building to meet their workforce needs, research has shown that the workforce continues to be the #1 risk to growth. So if you don't, if deal makers don't pay attention to the people issues, they're realizing more so now than ever before that it could have a significant impact on the deal itself. And so what we're going to talk about today in this webinar is what is it that you can do, particularly post-integration. What is it that you can do to motivate, to inspire, and to engage the workforce so that they stay with you, not just in the short term once the deal goes through, but long term? How do you get them to commit to stay? So with that, Jeppe, let's do another. Yeah, I thought we were going to do another poll, but we'll wait to do that. Is there anything you want to add here before we go on to your piece?
No, I think, if you look through these numbers here, right, there's so many people things here. I was just noticing this aligned top leadership and decision right early, right? And the other one, evaluated culture / strategic fit early.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really important factors to focus on as well, and which we will be touching on because they are important.
They are, and interestingly enough, during that due diligence piece, that's done in the upfront of the deal, these are pieces that are not necessarily pieces that the company chooses to focus on. And so one of the things that we're seeing is that, in not focusing on those factors has a downstream impact, right? When you get to the post-integration piece and the overall, not only success of the deal, but also the value that you create as a combined company.
I agree.
Okay, back over to you.
Yes. No, so I think we can all agree that in the last 2.5 years since March 2020, then the way people have worked has just changed dramatically. And I think it was Einstein saying that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And I think if we just replicate what we did prior to the pandemic when we worked with M&A integration, then we are definitely not going to succeed. So what we're talking about is that we need to actually change our playbook so it actually starts to address those things that we have seen in the last couple of years. We need to employ a people first thinking. We need to understand that that bold leaders, they know how the work gets done, or they need to know how work gets done if they want to succeed with their M&A integration efforts. So that's really the core thing for us. Understanding that done with the people and done by the people actually beats done to the people. We have to have a more engaging and involving activity going on with them for the integration. You again, Hillary.
Okay, so we've got another poll question for you. I'll be curious to get your perspective on this, which is, in your view, what is the biggest issue that you face when going through an M&A integration? And again, we'll give you 20 seconds here to select from the list below as to what that issue might be. Again, top issue. Aha. Navigating change fatigue. So interestingly enough, at Gagen, we've been tracking how M&A is impacting employees and their experience at work. And you also at your companies may be tracking that impact within your own organization. And it's fascinating to me that no matter which audience we speak to, and we've been tracking this over the last couple of years now, navigating change fatigue comes up as the #1 issue, no matter which group of people we're speaking with. And so what we'll do now, and hopefully by the end of this, webinar, you'll have a better sense for, how do you navigate through some of these big issues, and particularly navigate through change fatigue and in effective ways. So let's go on, Jeppe. This is interesting. This question has not failed me yet with the change fatigue.
Yes.
Okay.
No, so the change fatigue is definitely also about the people, right? Because where does the change fatigue appear? It appears around the people. And I think right now we are talking about things like burnout, etc., right? And if we just push several more change programs on top of that, that really creates an environment of change fatigue. I think in the second, or was it maybe the first seminar or webinar, we actually talked about how many change programs people were running, and I think almost all the participants were running several programs in the company at the same time, and it is hurting it. There's no doubt about that. So I wanted to share a story here because I've been working as a consultant, but also internally on several M&A projects. And I had one particular project I was working on some years ago where the playbook said, well, we need to listen to the people that we have just acquired. So I was on the acquiring side, right? So I was sent in to talk to the other side for 4 weeks, traveling around, trying to figure out what were they doing good at, who were the key people to retain, and so forth. I came back with this fully fledged report, and I thought there were a lot of best practices that we could actually adopt on our side, right? And I pushed it forward to my sponsor, and then he said this thing here. You know what? We bought them. We are second to none. There's nothing we can learn from them. I mean, to me, that was arrogance, big time. And I guess I've never really understood why that happened. But I think it is also something that actually immediately will cause fatigue on the other side. So there are many examples that this was definitely done to the people.
Yeah, and I'll share a similar story. There was a company that we were working with probably about 5 or 6 years ago now that was undergoing a significant transformation, and they were surveying their people, their like, it was almost a census, quite frankly, every quarter on how the transformation was going. And the questions were very focused on employees' readiness, willingness, and ability to shift behavior. And I'll never forget, we were working with the top leaders within the organization to look at the results that had come in from the survey prior. So it had maybe been 90 days previously. And that was the results view that we were looking at. And we mapped it against the transformation at this point had been going on for maybe a year. And so we were looking at the results from a year ago to the results over the last 90 days. And there was virtually no change. Like, you literally could have put them on top of each other and not seen one difference. And this speaks to the point we were talking about earlier around the criticalness of building leader capability to drive change, because when we went around the room that day and, at first, there was shock and awe, of course, that, oh my gosh, like, we haven't made much progress at all, to, well, what is it that we've really done visibly, meaningfully, intentionally to bring people along? And the answer was not much. Well, therein lies the results. So again, because there wasn't really this focus on, bringing people in, understanding, listening to them and really understanding what is it that they need, what it is that they want, to be able to help us through this, there wasn't a partnership. And so they made a commitment. The good news is they made a commitment at the end of that meeting to have more of a listening culture, right? Where they're really understanding where people are and what they need to get on board with you. And it made all the difference. So, to your point, we can't state it enough that it really is about the people. It's not about the leaders. It's not about the transaction itself and everything that we're doing to shift their experience to be a good one.
Good. So Gagen and Innovisor has come together, and it's almost a match made in heaven. And we discovered that when we suddenly started to present methods to each other, while in Innovisor we work with what we call the 6 blockers of change, Gagen works with the 6 levers that help people navigate change. So as you can see, so 2 6s here, right? That just looks good on a slide, but it's actually better than that, in my view, and I think you agree, Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah.
What we will do now is, sorry, go ahead.
No, please, let's go into them.
Yeah, no. So we will just go through them one by one so you have an idea about what we're talking about. So the 6 blockers of change is something Innovisor we have been looking at change data from the last 15 years, and we've been mining them and looking for patterns and signals as we've been building our prescriptive analytics method or tools. And what we discovered was that we had 6 elements that were really critical to get right if you want to see. But it was actually mostly those 6 elements that people actually did not get right. And the 6 elements were these 6 here. So one of them was having a leadership team that worked as a united group, right? First one. Second one, that the organization networks were fragmented. Because if they were fragmented, you could not expect viral effect of your change program. Thirdly, that the key stakeholder groups were not positively aligned with the change program. And the 2 key stakeholder groups were, first of all, the top leadership group, and secondly, something we call the 3% that impact the 90% of the employees. It's a very critical employee group. Fourthly, commitment. Do people like the company they work for? That's a very, very good thing to have. Otherwise, they're not going to help you on your change. Fifthly, leadership follow-through, which is critical. Do they really keep on top of the program that they have launched here? So in an acquisition mode, are they really keep on top of it, or are they just crossing it off and say, okay, we're on to the next one? And the last one, project team setup. Do we have the team, the resources, the capability on board really to succeed with this? So those are the 6 blockers of change, and they all concern people.
Yep. So then let's zoom in on the 6 levers. So if you want people to, you want to help people navigate through change, you have to shift belief. And that means you have to intentionally and deliberately change what people experience every day. And in our experience, the employee experience can be mapped over these 6, what we call, I would say, commingling levers, which you can dial up or dial down at various moments based on what your needs are. And those 6 levers are, as you see on the screen. So it's about values. It's about, being intentional about what you're doing around values, around the energy that you're creating within an organization, your behaviors, symbols that you're sending, your systems and how those are working for or against you, as well as your communication. And I think it's really important to note that these 6 levers don't operate in silos. They also don't have clean borders. They touch, they overlap, and they're meant to be highly permeable. And any one change can, tend to color another aspect of one of these levers. So, said another way, they're often interdependent. So we need to pay attention to that. And one other point I'll just make here is that, the power of these levers isn't that they're not meant to be engineered like a machine, so to speak, but they're meant to provide a comprehensive vantage point through which you can systematically assess the experience that you're trying to create.
Are we taking the next one?
Let's keep going. Yeah. Let's keep going.
Good. So now we talked a bit about M&A and we talked a bit about O&A in the start. So how can M&A integration benefit from O&A? And I think the way to explain that is best done by examples. So let me just go on to the first little example here. So some years back, we worked with a US company here. They had just gone through an acquisition. Not just gone through it, they went through an acquisition 12 months before, and we went in and we discovered an integration that looked just like you see here on the screen. So 2 people or 2 companies not really working together. There was one person connecting the 2 units together. And it was a shocker for them because they thought, the acquisition was done because they wanted to merge the capabilities of the 2 companies, but somehow it didn't happen. And when we saw the picture, we asked them, how could that be? And the HR director said, yeah, but nobody told us why and how we were to collaborate with them. And about what? And this tells you a lot about how you have to do with getting people to connect to each other. You need to facilitate it and you need to discipline it. It does not happen by itself. And the picture here, as you see, is very clear and shows very clearly there are no connections across, right? So this is one way of using it. Another key example I want to explain here is I had a good friend who he was working at a tech company, and within 3 years he actually went through 7 mergers. And I was kind to ask him, so how do you cope with that? And what he was saying to me was that, well, I actually disregard whatever is happening on all those mergers here. I make sure to make get my things done by working with the people I know, the ones I know will get things done, and the people I trust. So he only worked with people that he really sympathized with, that he thought was competent and trustworthy. And he actually stick together with these people through all those 7 mergers. They kind of threw new organizational charts at him, new capabilities, etc. But he disregarded it. He just stick together with the people he know. And this is actually something that is we are seeing a lot, and that is that there's actually nothing that can make people stick together with the people they know like being acquired by an outsider. Because if you're being acquired by an outsider, then suddenly, even you didn't have anything together before, you suddenly get this shared story. You get this common identity. You were the ones being acquired. And we can see those clusters of people, very strongly connected people, even from acquisitions that have been done 10 years before when we do our research. When there are clusters of people strongly connected people that we cannot explain by anything else, we always ask the question, so have you been going through an acquisition in the past? And we always get the answer, yes, we have been going through a merger or an acquisition in the past. Good. So what can you do with O&A and M&A integration? Where is the value in it? And here you have this small figure here that looks at value generation, but I want to say it's also to some extent actually value protection. So there are activities in the short term you have to do very quickly right after the acquisition, and there are activities in the long term. And we will go through them one by one here now. So in the short term, what are you doing? Well, you need to retain the key people, because when you are in a state of flux, there's nothing that can make people leave like that. You have people that are critical experts. You have people that are critical for keeping the engagement at the right place, and so forth. So you need to retain the key people. If you look at a picture like the one to the right, and you're saying, okay, so who should I retain if I want to keep the productivity at the right level, you would probably look for some of those people that are kind of tying things together. If they leave, you will have an immediate drop in productivity. Of course, connections will be reestablished over time, but the immediate drop will be there, and it takes time to create new connections. Secondly, you would try to figure out how can we build a coherent leadership team, a leadership team that can work together. Very important. You would thirdly try to find those people that had the influence amongst the employees that shaped the perceptions of the 90%, the ones that people would go to make sense of things. And again, if we're looking at this picture, you're probably looking at some of those that are embedded into those clusters of people here. Fourthly, you would try to figure out, okay, so who are those people that we need to bring in if we want to have impactful project teams? The people that should be engaged in what Hillary can talk about with the 6 levers of change. Who would those people be? So those 4 things: retain key people, build coherent leadership teams, mobilize influencers, informal influencers, and create impactful project teams. That's really important, and it's within the first 3 months that you have to do this.
And I'll add a few more to the list. Thank you, Jeppe. So a big one for us is making sure that you're engaging people in what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it versus telling them. So in our experience, people respond much, much better when they feel that they're part of something versus something is being done unto them, as we talked about earlier. Also, convincing people that they can change. Sometimes I think people need, especially if they've had the experience where they've gone through something before and it was negative for them, convincing them that they can do it and why they should do it is really important. Another big thing for us is making sure that you have empathy for other folks. So everyone's coming to this newly formed company with different experiences. And I think sometimes we lose the proverbial, put yourself in the other person's shoes, walk in their shoes for a moment. And so being human, being kind, asking questions is really important at the start of the post-merger integration. Also, from a leadership capability building perspective, one of the things that's critical is getting leaders comfortable with talking about the journey that you're on as a newly combined organization while you're still forming it. And so, I think we can probably all attest to this in our experience that leaders are much, much more comfortable when they have the answer first. The reality is that is oftentimes not the case at the start of an integration. And so helping them understand that that's okay, and that really their role is to show up as a host versus a hero, and co-create that journey together with employees is really, really important. And then just on a tactical note, particularly from a change in communications perspective, making sure that you're staying ahead of the integration management office, meaning making sure that even before you're engaged with them, that you're starting to look at all of the relevant and accessible background materials and putting together your plans and your questions as you move forward is really important, because we don't always get to dictate when it is that we become engaged, and sometimes it's too late. And so making sure that you're planning even before you're engaged will make you ready and more equipped for when the office is stood up and you're going to move things along. Wonderful. Shall we go to the long term, Jeppe?
Yeah, anyway, I really like the engage more than tell, I have to say, so I just want to emphasize that one.
Yes, important.
Yes, exactly. Good. Next one. So the long term, what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about when you've been kind of working on this for the first 3 to maybe 6 months, right? Now you want to get more value of it. You want to realize the synergies that were actually the real reason why you were merging the two companies. And what you do here is that you start to optimize connectivity. You do make sure that people are really connecting to each other. Like this picture here, which shows you how you can identify people and say, okay, if we connect these people together, if we give them a meaningful task to work together on, give them the time actually to build relationships with each other. Because building relations is not like done like this. It actually takes time. It takes a task, and it takes also some social time. I mean, it's difficult to build relationships unless you're actually together face to face. So it has been a problem here over the pandemic. So that's the first thing. Optimize connectivity, build innovation capabilities. A lot of M&As are actually requiring to find better ways to do things. And you can find synergies in many, many different places. You don't want to be like the person I was mentioning before that was so arrogant that he didn't want to listen to what good capabilities you had in another company. Thirdly, and I'll come back to that one, that one is about tracking progress, making sure you actually stay on top of what you're doing. It's not only because of the project team it's important, but it's also important for the leadership team. Fourthly, make sure that your plan is not so carved in stone that you cannot make changes, because you will experience things that are totally different than expected. And you need to be ready to calibrate your plan for greater impact.
We always jokingly refer to that one, Jeppe, the last one you said is no plan survives first contact. No, so be ready for change. All right, a few others I'll add to the list. So, I think particularly when you're co-creating the story of the combined company, making sure that you're doing so in a way that's connecting employees to that that sense of shared purpose. Like, why are we all doing what it is we're doing? In service of what? I think really helps them to see that North Star, helps them to see that there's, this is for a cause or a purpose that's much greater than me. Making sure also, and this is, I think, particularly true for leaders, is helping them to project themselves in the story that they want to tell, and helping others do the same. So, we always talk about at Gagen that a story isn't a story until everybody can tell it. And so make sure that as you're co-creating that story, that you're doing so in a way that people can see themselves in it and they can make it theirs. Cross-functional collaboration is also a really important piece to successful integration, and making sure that you're not letting the structure that you have inside a company, your company, get in the way of that cross-collaboration, because a lot of the work that's done in change and transformation is in the white space, right? That sits in between these functional areas. And so, leading the way from where you sit and making sure that you're doing everything you're doing with an enterprise mindset is really, really important. The other thing, and I talked about this earlier, but making sure that you're fostering that culture of listening, right? So again, you don't have to have all of the answers. How are you making sure that leaders are showing up in a way that, they're comfortable that they don't have all the answers, and that they're the convener, that they're bringing folks together, that they're listening, and and also that there is in place this two-way feedback loop, so that it's not just a one and done event where you listen to people, but you build that into your operating rhythm. And Yeppy obviously and your firm specialize in these change networks and making sure that those are getting stood up. And then lastly, and this sort of speaks to the 6 levers that I introduced earlier, making sure that you're reinforcing your strategy through the experiences that you want to create, and using those 6 levers that we talked about earlier as a way to make sure that you're checking in on, are we doing things that are affecting positively energy? Are we doing things that are affecting behaviors? Are we doing things, that symbolize, that we're a combined company? So those are just some other things that I'd add to our ever-growing list, Yeppy.
Yeah, I really love bullet point number 4 with the listening, because what I'm always saying is that, well, we need to listen, and listen, because otherwise we're too arrogant, right? So make sure we listen, and listen. And then when we kind of establish that trust through the listening, we can actually start to work together. We can co-create, we can collaborate. Right. And if we get that done, right, then you actually turn your people into insiders. And that's the most powerful way you can actually get them to when they are insiders, because then they speak your case at the water cooler or the coffee machine or wherever you are, right? So that's really what we want.
Yeah, okay.
Wonderful. Good. Yeah, so the next thing I wanted to say is that we've actually in our research been looking at, so how many of these programs are really tracking their progress over time. And it's a shocking low number. It's actually less than 20% that track progress over time. Just imagine if you're not tracking progress, what risks are you really exposing yourself to then? You will not know if you're on track. That's the first thing. You will not know if you're delivering on what you were trying to do, and you actually do not have any chance really to report back to your top leadership on what is happening, right? So a strong recommendation from here is, don't forget that rhythm that Hillary was talking about before. Make sure you make this an integrated part of your rhythm.
Great. Thank you, Yeppy. So I think now, I don't know about you, Yeppy, but I'm sick of talking, and I'm sure you are too, and we'd love to turn it over now to the audience to hear from you and get your perspective on what it is that we've shared so far. Is it resonating? If so, why is it? Or if it's not, what would you add to the conversation that we're having? So with that, Hilton, I think they can either put it in the chat, right? And you'll pick out a few for us to respond to.
Absolutely. So thank you, Hillary and Yeppy. That's fascinating. Not surprisingly, we've had a bunch of questions come in. I do adore this one from Vicky. And Yeppy, I might ask you to take a run at this first, and then Hillary, if you could add commentary to it as well. The biggest M&A integration is actually how to manage customer relationships. So the external part, a lot of M&As happen, and then the integration is who owns which customer. How might the work that Innovisor and Gagen do help organizations with that part of M&A integration?
So what we actually do as well is that we also look at who owns the customer inside each company and how they connected to what people. So if you get an overview of first of all, your internal networks, but also how the external network's looking, right, for both companies, and you kind of get that overview and bring them into the same room, then suddenly you can start to discuss, so how will we work together on these customers? Whereas I do agree with you, if you don't get that overview, what will happen? Well, you will have two companies attacking the same customers all the time. I was part of a messy merger many years back where 6 companies were merged together as one in a telco company. And it was messy, I tell you, because the customers got attacked by all 6 companies still 6 months afterwards. And it's just not good for client relationships.
Yeah, and the one thing I would add to that would be to say, absolutely an integrated and thoughtful plan for how you do customer outreach is really important. And one of our tried and true guiding principles around customer engagement is that, the person who, is touching the customer during this period of time should be the person who has the closest relationship. So that is who the customer works with on a day-to-day basis. That's who the customer trusts. That's and so making sure that that plan and strategy is very customer focused in that we're taking a very tailored, customized, and thoughtful approach to engagement with them.
Perfect. Thank you. Hillary, this question for you from Uzma, which gets to, I believe, the 6 levers.
Yes.
Do you have examples of how you reinforce your strategy through employee experiences?
Certainly. So I think you can the 6 levers are really multifaceted, and so we have used them in a multitude of different ways. So it could be strategy reinforcement, it could be through an M&A, it could be through a culture transformation, and so they're really meant to be multidimensional in that way. But one of the things that when you're thinking about strategy in particular, Uzma, is making sure that you're, when you think about the experience you want to create, is how do you think about what are the symbols that you're sending that reinforce that strategy, for example, or what are the systems that you have in place, and are those systems complementary to that strategy, or are you working in ways that are in conflict with that strategy based on what your systems allow you to do or not do? Think about your behaviors as an organization, and do those behaviors reinforce your strategy? And if they don't, then you may have some work to do to make sure that there's some reconciliation there. But you can absolutely use those 6 levers no matter what the change or shift is that you're making. Thanks for the question.
Hillary, thank you. And again, not surprisingly, as the marketing person on this call, I would encourage everybody to look at the downloads that are available beneath your screen right here, because there are some white papers where we go into a lot more detail, certainly with the Gagen process and the 3% rule that Jeppe was talking about earlier. So please don't miss an opportunity. Download the great resources that we have here. Jeppe, this question for you coming in from Ruben. My question is about tracking the process. How do we notice we're moving in the right way? And what might some of those factors that we track look like?
Tracking the progress. How are we noticing if we're moving in the right way? Was that the question?
Correct. So back to your point about 20% of people don't track the progress. What are some best practices around that?
Well, I can at least tell you what we have seen is that, first of all, there's a strong correlation between tracking and the success of a change program. That's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, there's something about the frequency. In the frequency, you need to track, according to our stats at least, minimum every 2 months how you're progressing with your change program. It's not enough to do it on a half-year basis or a 12-month basis. You actually need to track it every 2 months so you keep the attention of the top leadership team on the change program that you have. I think you will agree that if you have that tracking happening that often and becoming part of the top leadership conversation, then you can calibrate your plans. You can also ask for new resources, more financial resources and people resources. And that is really, really important. Then you can say, so what is the tracking about? It really depends on, are you trying to change perceptions or are you trying to change structures? Because if you're trying to change the network structures, so how the integration of 2 key companies are happening, then you should expect that that takes a bit longer because relationships are sticky. And I mean, people tend to stick around those people that they have built their relationships with long ago, right? And you actually need to kind of detach them from those relationships. And I mean, what I see is that takes at least 6 months to make that happen. So those, you don't expect quick changes on relationships. Do expect quick changes on perceptions and mindsets.
And I would add to that, Jeppe, that I think over time, I think you want to aim for having an uptick in things like people feeling like, as a combined company, you're moving in the right direction, that they have a high morale, right? That they're feeling like, the company respects people, that the company's paying attention to things like a focus on the customer, to the comment an earlier participant was making, speed, agility, those kinds of things. So, and again, it doesn't happen overnight. You want to track it over time. But I do think that a focus on the culture that you want to create and the communications can lead to some, significant business outcomes, if you will.
Yeah.
So folks, and this is a question, a fantastic question coming in from Doreen, perhaps the most classic M&A question of all time, which is, how do you actually deem an M&A to be successful? Because there's so many different metrics you could put to it. Performers retained, the morale is positive, people are included, customers and partners feel confident that the merged company will succeed. But for Gagen and for Innovisor, how might we look at the definition of a successful M&A? And Doreen's question really is, what percentage of M&As are really successful after all? Fascinating question.
I was surprised by the numbers we saw on the poll, I have to say. I don't remember what it said. Did it say 18.8%?
Yes.
Very successful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll take a stab at this, Doreen. And I do think there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to this, because I do think so much of it is entirely dependent on what is it that you value as an organization, right? And what companies value. When you think of particularly the soft metrics, those differ from company to company. So I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all approach. But, despite the obvious ones that you see around, making sure that you deliver on the hard numbers, hard numbers that have to do with creating value around the deal. I do think a big one that at least we're seeing at Gagen that companies are tracking is around talent retention. That's huge, especially now, and making sure if that you're maintaining, if not improving in that, you're not seeing a significant drop in talent retention, because there is a direct correlation between being able to realize the value of the deal, right? If you don't have the people around that understand the systems and the processes, you can't get things done. You can't make the shifts that you want to make. I also think another one that's emerging for us is also culture, and how that combined culture is impacting not only the hard metrics, but also employee sense of things like belonging and connection. Beyond even just engagement. And so I think there's a lot to unpack there. And so much of it, as I mentioned at the start of this, is really, it sort of varies company by company, but the talent retention piece and the culture piece are two that stick out to me. Jeppe, I don't know what you would add.
No, I 100% agree on the talent retention. I think on the short term, I had one where I said you need to retain the key people. One of the issues with retaining the key people is if you go ahead and you ask the company we just acquired, who are the key people, right? You will have people from the top pointing to who they think are the key people. The issue is they seldom know who those people are, right? We have this iceberg of ignorance that they are exposed to, where they can see almost nothing of what is going on in the real organization. So, but if you get into the people and you ask them who they go to get things solved, or done, then they can tell you. And those are the people you need to retain. And it reminds me of, we were involved in at that time was the world's biggest auction of a company. And to protect the value of that auction, we actually identified the key people to retain, the experts. And we identified who were those people that we needed to keep happy in the process. And I think for them, that was the two key things actually to protect the value back then.
Yeah, and one other one that I just thought of as you were speaking, I think another big one I think is trust in leadership. Like, do people trust that leaders are, not only doing right by the company, but also doing right by their people? And I think that's another one that we continuously see companies looking into and saying, do we want to track this, and how do we want to track it?
Thank you, guys. Really comprehensive answer, and loud applause from Doreen in the Q&A box. So thank you both. For those who still have questions, please don't stop adding them into the Q&A. We're going to go now to sort of the summary of today's webinar. But if you have questions, please keep adding them, and we will follow up straight after this this presentation with a fuller response. Hillary and Jeppe, if you would take us into summaries and key takeaways.
Go ahead,
You
Jeppe.
want to go first, Hillary, or should I do that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so the takeaways, I think, throughout this session here was that, well, don't leave it to chance. Make sure you work with your people. Make sure you actually retain the right people, right? So you can succeed. We have these networks of people that are connecting to each other, and that's where the sense-making happens. But if we lose the wrong people, right, then quitting suddenly actually becomes contagious. So you want to make sure you capture them very early in the process. I had some key learnings that I actually wrote down here on my piece of paper coming from what Hillary said. And I really like that you said, leaders, make sure you don't pretend to be the heroes. You need to be a host.
That's right.
And I love that sentence.
Good. Yeah, it's true. I think it's so important because if you don't shift that perspective, that mindset, then it's very easy to become paralyzed by the magnitude of the change that's in front of you. But if you just stop for a minute and say, you know what, it's okay that I don't have all the answers. It's just my job is to bring people together and to listen to them. It becomes a much more manageable task. And so I think that's really important. And the other piece that I'll just add to this, Jeppe, to what you have here is the story. The story is so important, making sure that you have a clear, compelling story that everybody can tell. And that's connected to your combined purpose as an organization is really important.
Yes, I agree.
Fantastic. Well, folks, we'll draw the webinar to a close now. Thank you all for your attendance. You will receive an email with a replay and an on-demand version of this. Of course, as we've mentioned before, the slideware from today's presentation is available for download now, along with some other great assets from Innovisor and Gagen to flesh out some of the concepts and discussion that we've had today. But we'd like to thank you all for your attendance. We very much look forward to seeing you again at the next Transformation Catalyst webinar. Have a great evening, a great afternoon, and a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.